NASA's mission is to explore the unknown.
There's more that we don't know than we do know. That's just the nature of the universe.
In the search for answers, it launches its scientists into space, its craft beyond the limits of the solar system.
Taking risks is part of making discoveries.
Space exploration is like lighting a match, and we don't know what lurks in the shadows.
Hey, what is that?
There could be anything out there.
Apollo astronauts bring something unexpected back from the lunar surface.
Is this organism terrestrial or extraterrestrial?
A daring CIA mission unlocks the secrets of the Soviet space program.
They're going to find out, by hook and by crook, how a space probe was built.
And a deep space mission discovers a pyramid on a distant world.
Of all the things we thought we were going to find on Ceres, it wasn't this.
NASA's missions have uncovered disturbing anomalies.
Okay, we're seeing 3 or 4 objects.
No, there are 3 objects
that continue to perplex our finest scientific minds. These are NASA's Unexplained Files. An image from the Curiosity rover sparks worldwide controversy.
Right there, as clear as a hand in front of your face, you can see the shadow on the left of the rover.
Something is casting a shadow over the Martian surface.
This looks like a human figure.
September 2012. NASA's Curiosity rover is 1 month into its exploration of Mars's Gale crater.
We're interested in Mars because it's so much like the Earth. We're sending this very sophisticated laboratory to a place where there may have been life in the past. There may still be some evidence of that past life preserved there, and we have the tools to detect it.
The rover's array of 17 cameras photographs every step of its journey, and NASA publishes hundreds of these images online. One picture from a navigation camera reveals something completely unexpected.
There's one crucial difference between this image and all the other images taken on Mars, and it's the shadow. What's casting that shadow?
The photo goes viral, and the mysterious shadow provokes intense speculation.
There's what looks like a humanoid figure, a humanoid shape, a shadow, standing right outside the rover and captured on camera. It is a very, very intriguing image.
NASA does not provide any official explanation for the shadow. Conspiracy theorists point to a leaked NASA document as a possible clue.
One of the things found was a spreadsheet, which apparently was entitled Non-Terrestrial Officers.
What other meaning could non-terrestrial officer have if not off of this planet?
If they're not deployed on Earth, where are they? Maybe they're part of a permanent human presence on Mars.
The success of the Matt Damon blockbuster depicting a manned mission to Mars has heightened interest in the Red Planet. But NASA claims it does not currently have the capability to send a manned spacecraft to Mars.
Do we have personnel on Mars? Is there actually a secret space program?
No human has ever been to Mars, and even though we've sent many spacecraft missions, they've all been robotic.
Now, NASA, of course, said that nobody has been to Mars, and yet other people will point out, well, yeah, but a lot of the technology to go to Mars exists, so why are we not using that? Why are there no people on Mars?
Skeptics point out that the shape of the shadow in the image from the Curiosity rover doesn't match any known spacesuit currently in use.
Every suit that's ever been developed has been one that places the astronaut inside of a gas bubble. That causes suits to be incredibly immobile. So looking at the photo, the astronaut is making a motion with his arm that is physically impossible with gas suits today.
But the movement of raising an arm would only be impossible if the figure in the rover image was wearing a suit based on current human technology.
Just as aviation technology runs 10, 15, 20 years ahead of what's publicly declared, it stands to reason that the same is true of space technology.
Skin suit development is underway currently by NASA and by others around the world, and these suits look nothing like the suits that you're used to seeing.
Photo analyst Mark D'Antonio has been using computer modeling to investigate what could have created the distinctive arm shape in the image.
I took the rover and I put it where it belongs and put the sun in the sky where it belongs for the time that shot was taken. And what I found was something very interesting.
Recreating the lighting conditions in which the picture was taken reveals the source of the shadow.
When I rendered it, I saw this show up. And if you look at the photo in question, this could be this, and that could be that, and that could be that. And there's the mast cam sitting over here. I believe that we are looking at the Mars hand lens imager on the end of the robotic arm.
What looks like the first ever Martian tourist is simply Curiosity's own shadow. The astronaut's arm is in fact an extended robotic arm holding the camera. But the day that a human being visits Mars may be just over the horizon. The Orion spacecraft that will one day carry mankind to the Red Planet already exists. The rocket that will power the mission is under trial at the ATK test facility in Utah.
It is larger than any launch vehicle that's ever been produced before. It's about 25% more powerful than even the Saturn V lunar rockets in the past.
Orion is already flying.
The dawn of Orion and a new era of American space exploration.
We flew in December, very successful flight, proved out most of the systems that we could do from a low Earth orbit to get confidence in the vehicle.
Orion's advanced technology will enable astronauts to travel at unprecedented speeds.
Some of the new technologies are these ion drives. This is a type of engine that actually sends very small particles at near light speed out the back of the nozzle of the spaceship, as opposed to a big explosion. It's a really, really small explosion that happens over a long period of time.
But there are other obstacles to establishing a human presence on Mars. Perhaps the biggest is keeping astronauts alive and healthy during what could be a 2.5-year journey.
How are we going to get enough food on board to feed the crew? And secondly, how are we going to protect them against the deadly radiation boiling off the sun? If the sun has a storm, and it occasionally does, it's going to boil off these high-speed particles that'll zip right through their bodies and give them instant cancer. It's not a good scene.
Food will be a problem for any manned mission, but as long as the spacecraft can carry enough of it, it could offer the solution to the deadly radiation.
Once you've consumed the food, you have to go to the bathroom. Your poop still contains hydrogen, and hydrogen remains a very precious radiation protectant for you. And what you want to do with your poop is actually put it in bags, seal the bags, and put those bags back on the wall where you took the food in the first place so that your radiation shielding remains intact.
A radiation shield made of human excrement will be just one of the grim realities of space travel for the first pioneers to Mars.
Once you go into deep space on your way to Mars, that's when measures like these are going to really matter.
For now, Curiosity continues its journey across the Red Planet alone. But it might have company soon.
I certainly hope that we eventually go to Mars. I'm sure that we will do that. And maybe at that point, some human will walk up to a rover and put their hand on it. But, of course, that hasn't happened yet.
Apollo 12 astronauts return to Earth, carrying an unexpected payload.
There is something alive on those cameras.
Scientists and astronauts struggle to explain the mystery.
At the time, it was thought that space was an instantly lethal environment.
Had they just discovered life on the moon?
November 19th, 1969. Apollo 12 becomes the second manned spacecraft to approach the lunar surface.
I got some kind of a horizon out there. I got some craters too, but I don't know where I am yet.
I thought, where are we going to land? There's no room to land. And then we waited for these probes to illuminate, which were about 5 feet below the landing pad. I said, contact light.
Contact light. Roger, copy contact.
And then Pete touched down, and I thought, wow, this is the moon. We're really here.
Apollo 12 was the second manned lunar landing mission, and one of the goals of this mission was to recover hardware from the Surveyor 3 probe that had landed 2 years earlier, and see just what the lunar environment did to something that was exposed to the surface for that long.
The two astronauts, Alan Bean and Pete Conrad, conduct a thorough inspection of Surveyor 3.
They had been in space longer than any other space hardware. The thing they wanted the most was the television camera, because the television camera had metals in it, it had a lot of different materials, and they could then look at the effect of radiation, temperature change, and all this.
This is important stuff, because if you're ever going to build a base on the moon, you know, some sort of colonization effort, you need to know, is dust going to get into everything? What about the fact that there's no air on the outside? What about the extremes of temperature? So it's, of course, important to know how your own equipment is performed.
10 days after leaving Earth, the astronauts return, carrying with them the equipment recovered from Surveyor 3. When scientists examine the camera, they find something disturbing.
Investigators took a look at this camera and sampled it for microbial growth, and surprisingly, got growth from one of 33 locations that they sampled.
They find something alive on a camera that's been on the surface of the moon for more than 2 years.
The thought at the time is that the space environment was the extreme possibility for life, that there was nothing that could survive in space. Exposed to space, everything would die.
Space, as we know it, is inhospitable. There's no water, solar radiation flare, shouldn't see anything, but it's there. So the question that remains now is this organism terrestrial or extraterrestrial?
The organism resembles a well-known Earth life form.
The organism that was found was a streptococcus-type organism, which is similar to organisms you've got all over your body, and that when you're not feeling well, they'll take the opportunity to cause disease.
But the scientists who found the organism know of no form of human life capable of surviving in the hostile environment of space.
The obvious question is, well, how did it get here? Where did it come from?
One explanation for what happened here is that, in fact, these bacteria were just the result of contamination that occurred when this instrument was brought back to Earth.
A NASA scientist who worked on the Surveyor program claims to have identified an incident which could have contaminated the samples.
The videos of this sampling, looking at those, I saw an impossible situation in terms of limiting contamination. Not only did the investigators pick up sampling equipment, hold it against their bare arms, and put it back again, one investigator actually breathes on the camera area that they were going to sample.
But both current and former NASA scientists reject the contamination hypothesis.
I believe that is absolutely and completely, totally incorrect. Tremendous care was taken with this camera because nobody knew what it contained. They had made tremendous plans to do a detailed study of the camera as it was disassembled, and to look at every part to see if there was any possibility that any kind of microorganisms might be present.
The presence of only one kind of organism makes contamination after Apollo 12's return seem unlikely.
They only found Streptococcus mitis. Now, if they had contaminated that camera while they were working, you cannot sneeze and produce only Streptococcus mitis. You're going to have all sorts of different microorganisms. There are about 750 million bacteria in every tiny drop of spittle.
It is really not a plausible explanation that the contamination came in after it had been brought back to Earth.
If the life form on the camera is terrestrial and not the result of contamination, The only possible conclusion is that it must have somehow traveled to the moon.
Someone who was assembling the camera may have sneezed or coughed and got Earth-human microorganisms into the camera lens area, and then it went to the moon. Now, why would they just find one microorganism on the moon? Well, the answer is very simple. Most of them died. But this little hardy beggar called Streptococcus mitis decided that it didn't want to die, and so it just sat there and stayed there on the surface of the moon for 2.5 years before the Apollo 12 astronauts came and got it.
Scientists theorize that to survive the hazards of the lunar surface, the organism must have entered some kind of suspended animation.
When they tried to get these bacteria to grow again, they were kind of reluctant. It took a long time for them to get back up to speed.
If a microorganism's on the moon and has gone into a deeply dormant state to survive the vacuum, the cold, and the low-level radiation, then when it finds itself back on Earth in good conditions, it's going to take it longer to wake up and longer to get back into full metabolic action.
If the life form discovered on Surveyor really is something from Earth that has survived in space, the implications are staggering.
The possibility that microorganisms could remain alive on the surface of the moon for 2.5 years is tremendously important to science, because that means basically that microorganisms could conceivably be transported in space from one body to another.
So our idea of how life spreads has to be reoriented based on this. Life is not confined to planets.
A NASA probe in the far reaches of the solar system encounters unidentified light sources on a rock tumbling through space.
There are lights shining from what is supposed to be a dead rock.
No human craft has ever reached here, and yet there are structures which defy explanation.
This looks like a pyramid.
March 2015. Nearly 8 years into its mission to explore the asteroid belt, NASA's Dawn probe approaches Ceres.
We're at the edge of discovery now. We're flying into the asteroid belt. We're going to see what these objects in the asteroid belt are made from. It's our new frontier, the new place to explore.
Many planetary scientists believe that Ceres is a protoplanet, that it's one of those objects that formed but didn't get big enough to become a planet. So we think it may hold some clues to how planets form.
The whole world is waiting with anticipation to know what are we going to find.
When the first close-up images of Ceres beam back to Earth, scientists struggle to understand what they're seeing.
The first images come back from that object, and we're completely stunned.
In the middle of this gray field of craters and regular types of dust, there are these really bright lights coming from the surface. What's going on? We have no idea.
Bright white spots. Much, much brighter than anything else on the entire Ceres.
As the probe passes closer to the protoplanet, further images reveal more lights.
We see that these lights that are coming from the surface aren't just a one-off phenomenon.
First it was 2, and then it was a cluster of bright spots, and then we realized that those bright spots were inside of a crater.
Scientists identify nearly a dozen bright spots spread across 2 separate craters.
This isn't a trick of the light. These features are real and they're massive, 6 miles across. That's the size of a city.
Initial theories about the mysterious shining spots suggest they could be made of ice.
When you see a shiny reflective surface on a planet, normally you think of something like an ice cap, like the polar ice caps of the Earth are bright and very reflective.
But there's a problem with the ice theory.
Ceres is covered in ice.
If the entire surface of the protoplanet is covered in ice, the entire planet should be shining brightly, not just patches.
Why not all over the planet, many different locations? You've got to tie all the different little pieces of the puzzle together to know what's really going on.
Scientists are still puzzling over the mystery of the lights, when 3 months later, the Dawn probe sends back new images that reveal something even stranger.
We found one other very strange feature on Ceres. It's a mountain 3 miles high in the shape of a pyramid.
This pyramid is all on its own. It's about the size of the Alps, but on a dwarf planet that's only 1/100th the size of the Earth. This is like finding the Eiffel Tower on a golf ball.
What causes such enormous features to appear on such a small object?
This is really unusual. Ceres is nearly perfect sphere with the exception of this pyramid sticking out the surface. Of all the things we thought we were going to find on Ceres, it wasn't this.
An unusual feature on the side of the Ceres pyramid hints that the strange structure could be linked to the bright spots elsewhere on the surface.
We also see stripes on this pyramid that are not as reflective but still quite bright.
Are they the same as the other bright features we're seeing on the planet, or are they caused by some different process?
In search of answers, scientists look for clues closer to home.
If you look at the Earth from space, some of the shiniest parts are actually salt flats like you find in Utah or Bolivia.
Salt is very reflective. It's made out of little crystals that can refract the light and reflect it back at you. So maybe that's what's going on. Maybe it's salt flats on the surface of Ceres.
If salt really is what's causing the bright spots on Ceres, it could change everything.
Salt flats typically get created by fluids, by water.
That's one of the things that would allow life to exist, is if it had a subsurface ocean that had some salt content. Perhaps what we're seeing here is evidence that the correct chemical ingredients may actually exist on this object in the asteroid belt for life to exist on it. It's fantastic.
The Dawn spacecraft does not have the instruments capable of seeing what may lie beneath the surface of Ceres. For now, we can only imagine.
At this stage, Ceres is a complete mystery to us.
At the height of the Cold War, the CIA hatches a daring plan to steal Soviet space secrets.
It's like a classic heist movie, but the guys doing the heist are CIA agents.
Can a high-risk covert operation put NASA back on track in the space race?
If these guys were caught, the damage to superpower relations would have been severe.
October 4th, 1957. The Cold War is about to enter a new and dangerous phase. The Soviet Union kickstarts the space race with the launch of Sputnik, the world's first orbital satellite.
The Soviet Union slam dunked us. They beat us to the punch.
It was a shock because we had always thought of ourselves as being the leader in the world.
The United States response is a satellite called the Vanguard. Millions of viewers watch the launch on live TV.
Just a few feet off the pad, the rocket exploded.
A humiliating explosion on camera of the American response.
Even Kennedy acknowledges Russia's total dominance in space.
Kennedy came out and said, "We can't catch them. They're just too far ahead."
Panic and despair were getting deeper and deeper. This was a fatal trend that had to be reversed.
The Soviets decide to parade their success in front of the world. In 1959, Russia sends some of its most modern spacecraft on a world tour of international trade shows. For the CIA, it's a golden opportunity.
You always want to grab the enemy's hardware, see what they can do.
A team of human beings would actually have to get their hands on it and take it apart.
The Soviet star of the show is their most advanced spacecraft to date, the Lunic 5, which had recently sent back photographs from the far side of the moon.
The Americans caught a lucky break. The Soviets were so eager to show this thing off, they actually used a real one instead of a mock-up.
This could be the cookie jar, if they could only get their hands on it.
But Soviet security around the probe is tight.
The Soviets clearly knew it was something that the CIA would want to see. There was a 24-hour guard around the exhibit halls, and it was constantly watched.
It seems like Mission Impossible, but CIA operatives discover that after each exhibition, the probe is packed up and driven by truck to a local rail yard.
The rail yards are heavily guarded by Soviet guards who check each crate as it comes into the yard.
This journey to the rail yard gives the CIA a window of opportunity.
They don't know exactly what is coming in or when, so that gives the CIA agents a loophole to intercept a truck.
The CIA launches one of the most daring covert operations of the Cold War.
They were going to kidnap the Lunic, take it apart, photograph it, put it back together, and return it before anybody notices it was gone.
They were going to find out, by hook and by crook, how a space probe was built.
CIA agents managed to turn one of the exhibition truck drivers, who makes sure he is the last to leave the exhibition site, with the Lunic on board.
The driver has got his instructions, drives it up to where a CIA driver takes over.
They hijack the truck and then drive the truck into a salvage yard that they've rented just for this purpose.
At dawn, the Lunic's handlers will conduct a stock check. Unless the spacecraft can be returned intact before then, the theft will be discovered.
This was a matter of life and death. If these guys were caught, the damage to superpower relations would have been severe.
With the clock ticking, the team of U.S. experts starts to examine their prize, but they get an unwelcome interruption.
Click, click, the lights are on.
Suddenly, boom, everybody freezes. Have they been caught? Are they about to be shot?
The seconds tick by in total silence. It's a false alarm.
It was an automatic timer. It just happened.
The panic is over. Now the experts need to know what they've got their hands on.
They have hit the jackpot. This isn't a replica. This is a real production model, the 5th in the series.
Working against the clock, the undercover team conducts an in-depth examination of the spacecraft.
They spend the entire night methodically taking apart the Lunic, photographing every part of it, analyzing it, figuring out how every piece of it goes together.
Dawn is approaching fast, and the team has to rebuild the module so that it looks completely untouched.
The key to military intelligence is not only to learn things, but to make sure that the enemy does not know you know them.
But the Lunic probe doesn't come with an instruction manual.
They had bolts that wouldn't go on. They had to file some of them down.
There's one piece that won't fit, one rod that they just cannot seem to get back into place.
The load-bearing rod is a key component of the module. If it's not there, the theft will be obvious to the Russians. With only minutes to spare, the CIA team finally manages to screw it in place and complete the assembly.
The truck with the Lunic in the crate is returned to the rail yard, and at 7 a.m. the guard arrives. He checks off the crate and it goes on its way.
The Soviets didn't catch on till a year later when it got back to Moscow. And by that time, they couldn't even tell what country it had been kidnapped in.
Soviet space secrets are now in the hands of NASA's scientists and engineers.
Any secrets would definitely have been helpful to people building new spacecraft for the U.S.
It is impossible to be certain how much influence information from the stolen Lunic had on the U.S. space program. But within just a year of the covert operation, Alan Shepard becomes America's first man in space.
We may never know the full influence of the Lunic on the U.S. space program. The details of what exactly they learned from the Lunic heist are still classified.
Up next, an unidentified object appears in the night sky, and it's heading towards Earth.
This thing must be a spacecraft. There's nothing else it could be.
An astronomer spots an unidentified object heading towards Earth.
This object is coming towards us from deep space. Nobody really knows exactly what it is.
Its trajectory suggests it possesses some kind of engine.
Looking at the path that this object is on now, it must have powered itself in the past.
This thing is unlike anything we've seen before. Somebody built it, but who?
May 16th, 2010. A telescope in the hills north of Tucson, Arizona, scans the skies in the direction of the Leo constellation. It is part of a NASA-sponsored initiative searching for anything in space that could be a threat to our planet.
There are a large number of asteroids in the solar system, and so we try and map these and work out what their orbits are and make sure there's nothing going to come too close to the Earth in the near future.
Asteroid impacts can happen at any time. They've happened all through Earth history. They could even happen tomorrow.
Analysis of the telescope data reveals what looks like a possible threat object. The observers send details of the newly discovered object to the Minor Planet Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where it is given the asteroid designation, 2010 KQ. But almost immediately, scientists notice something strange.
Most asteroids have orbits that take them round and around the sun. This thing is really weird because it seems to have almost exactly the same orbit as the Earth.
The object seems to be tracking the Earth.
If you can't explain exactly what it is, then it's time to consult with other experts. What are we dealing with here?
NASA uses an infrared telescope facility in Hawaii to take a closer look.
There's something really weird about this one.
By studying the brightness of 2010 KQ, they're able to determine its size.
This thing is tiny. It's only a few tens of feet in length, which is much smaller than most asteroids.
The object's small size is not the only strange thing about it. NASA uses data from astronomers around the world to fine-tune their own orbital calculations for 2010 KQ. They determine that 2010 KQ's current orbit is impossible to achieve with known natural forces.
Looking at the orbit of this object suggests that at some point it's been powered.
News of the discovery sparks speculation worldwide.
Some people believe that this is an alien probe come to investigate us. But if you had the technology to visit the Earth and observe us, this orbit would be very inefficient because it only brings it close once every 25 years.
NASA's investigation continues to work on the basis that 2010 KQ is an asteroid. On May 25th, astronomers turned the Falks telescope in Hawaii to look at the mysterious object for 30 minutes. The observations reveal that 2010 KQ is an extremely unusual color.
If this was an asteroid, we'd expect its surface to be dull and dark, and yet it's bright and reflective.
The color of 2010 KQ doesn't match any known asteroid type, but it does match something completely unexpected.
Columbia, Houston, we have a tally-ho on LDEF.
In the 1980s, NASA performed an experiment testing the effect of the space environment on paints after years of exposure. When scientists compare the findings of this experiment to 2010 KQ, the results are astonishing.
The color of this object is spookily consistent with aged titanium dioxide pigment, which is exactly the same color as paint used in rocket boosters.
This object is covered in the paint they use for rockets. The conclusion is inescapable.
NASA say that this can only be a man-made object.
But where on Earth could it have come from?
Liftoff, the final liftoff of Atlantis.
When shuttles or some satellites are launched, once their booster rockets are spent, they detach and fall back to Earth.
Tracking the trajectory of this object, you can trace it back in time and see that it could be associated with a debris from a rocket launch around the middle of the 1970s.
Tracing its orbit back through space and time, scientists conclude that it must have left Earth orbit in April 1975. This narrows down the search for 2010KQ's identity.
We're almost certain that this is the upper rocket stage of a Russian lunar probe.
But there's a problem with this theory.
Decommissioned satellites can't even escape Earth's gravitational pull, so how can this thing?
Escaping Earth's gravity takes far more power than a single Russian lunar booster rocket can provide. One potential explanation is that the booster arrived at a special position in space called the L1 Lagrangian point.
The L1 Lagrangian point is where the Earth and the Sun's gravity balance each other out. An object passing through that point can suddenly change its orbit in a very chaotic fashion. If you pass something through the L1 Lagrangian point, you can never be certain about what it's going to do.
It could be that 2010KQ traveled through the L1 point and fell into orbit around the Sun, just ahead of the Earth. Traveling slightly faster than the Earth, it would take decades for it to catch up with us in our orbit and be close enough to be detected by Earth-based telescopes. The best available evidence suggests that 2010KQ is almost certainly part of a Russian lunar mission. But it will be a long time before the theory can be proved one way or another.
The jury is out on this one for now. We're going to have to wait until 2036 before this object comes back towards us again.
Still to come, an astronaut's cry of shock echoes across the live video feed from the ISS.
A highly trained astronaut screaming out in terror. What's going on?
An invisible force is pulling entire galaxies towards a single point in space.
Imagine something so big that hundreds of galaxies are being pulled in that direction.
That's not supposed to happen.
And nobody knows what it is.
There's a lot more to the universe than we actually knew or actually even thought of. So who knows what could happen?
June 2001. NASA launches the WMAP Deep Space Probe to gaze into the furthest reaches of our universe. It tracks the movement of entire galaxy clusters. 7 years later, its data reveals something that doesn't make sense.
Many galaxy clusters were moving toward the same location in space, and that was not expected.
Scientists at NASA's Goddard Space Center review the data and reach the same incredible conclusion.
The galaxies are sort of moving together in one particular direction, and that sounds really, really unusual to us.
This should not be happening. According to the Big Bang Theory, galaxies should travel in multiple different directions.
If all these galaxy clusters are moving in the same direction toward the same point in space, that means that there is a preferred direction.
It's as if they're being sucked down a giant cosmic drain.
Something unimaginably powerful is moving the galaxies in one direction, overcoming the effect of the Big Bang. Scientists can see what's happening, but the cause remains a mystery.
If you actually hide a magnet in a box, you don't see it. But if you have a compass in your hand, if you walk around it, you see the compass pointing in that direction. So you can tell something is pulling it. You don't know what it is, but something is pulling it.
One theory suggests that a truly massive object could be behind the effect.
There is something really heavy that's sort of tilting space-time in that direction, causing all those galaxies to flow that way.
Could the gravity of something unimaginably huge be attracting the galaxies?
Gravity is the force that most of us are most familiar with in the universe, but it's actually a very weak force. However, when combined with very large masses, gravity can be crippling.
Some of the most massive objects known to science are black holes.
Black holes exist in galaxies, including our own, on mass scales comparable to stars, and in the nuclei of galaxies, the masses are more like 1,000,000 to 1,000,000,000 times as massive as our sun.
But even the largest known black hole, 12 billion times the mass of our sun, is far too small to attract multiple galaxies. And there's another problem with this theory.
If there is a gigantic black hole, we see some evidence of it. The gas can flow into it, the black hole can eject jets. We don't see any of that.
Which means that something even weirder is going on. Weirder than a black hole.
This mysterious force seems to defy explanation and earns the name dark flow.
Whenever you hear dark matter or dark energy or dark anything, that's really code in science for we don't really know what that is.
Nothing visible in our universe is causing dark flow. To explain it, scientists must look beyond.
Because there's nothing that we see that's doing that, it has to be beyond our horizon in the universe.
Some people claim we live in the multiverse. There may be many, many universes, and we live in one little pocket. Maybe there's sort of a nearby universe, which is pulling us in one particular direction.
We seem to see areas in the universe where whole galaxies are being pulled through a narrow conduit. That's possibly an entranceway to another universe.
The discovery of dark flow might just be the first step in a journey that will take us beyond reality as we know it.
Experiment and observation are the last word. You can predict whatever you want, but unless it's observed, we don't accept it as being true.
Research into the cause of dark flow is ongoing. Two unidentified objects appear near the International Space Station.
We don't know what those two objects are.
Hundreds watching the live video feeds hear what sounds like an astronaut overcome with fear.
A highly trained astronaut screaming